So welcome, and this is a session understanding the barriers to academic and social success for disabled veterans at the 2024 CU Boulder Disability Symposium. My name is Marisha Lopez. I'm the program manager for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion in the College of Arts and Sciences. And I have the pleasure of introducing you all to our presenter for today's session. I am 5'1". I am female with dark brown, black hair. It's tied back right now. I have brown eyes, tan skin. I'm wearing gold rimmed glasses, and I'm wearing a black jacket. The University of Colorado Boulder is hosting the Disability Symposium to acknowledge that more work must be done to improve inclusion of persons with disabilities on the CU Boulder campus. Efforts to improve inclusion must focus on students, staff, and faculty. The 2021 CU Boulder Campus Climate Survey report, which was released in April of 2022, found that 44% of undergraduate students and 47% of graduate students reported experiencing incivility in the prior 12 months. For students with disabilities, these numbers climbed to 54% and 62% respectively. The symposium is a springboard to continue campus-wide conversations on how each of us can improve inclusion on campus and improve support for all persons with disabilities. The symposium organizers would also like to take a moment to issue the following land acknowledgement. University of Colorado Boulder, Colorado's flagship university, honors and recognizes the many contributions of Indigenous peoples in our state. CU Boulder acknowledges that it is located on the traditional territories and ancestral homelands of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, and many other Native American nations. Their forced removal from these territories has caused devastating and lasting impacts. While the University of Colorado Boulder can never undo or rectify the devastation wrought on Indigenous peoples, we commit to improving and enhancing engagement with Indigenous peoples and issues locally and globally. We will do this by recognizing and amplifying the voices of Indigenous CU Boulder student, staff, and faculty, educating, conducting research, and supporting student success, consulting, engaging, and working collaboratively with tribal nations to enhance our ability to provide access and culturally sensitive support, and to recruit, retain, and graduate Native American students. And now I am pleased to pass things over to our presenter today, LaShawn Duhart-Wood.
Oh, thank you so much. Not so much the wood anymore, but thank you so much. I hope you guys are doing today. I'm going to go ahead and let my associate director also introduce herself as well, and then the other individuals who will be helping.
Hi, my name is Claire Sharp, and I'm the Associate Director of Veterans Services at the University of Northern Colorado. I use the she series of pronouns, and I'm also a master's student getting my degree in clinical mental health counseling.
Hello, my name is Nicholas Medina, he, him, his. I'm a work study and a student intern pursuing my bachelor's of social work degree.
My name is Sydney Christian. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I am an intern through my human services major at Veterans Services, and I also am an ASL English interpreting major.
Thank you guys for introducing yourself. Again, I'm LaShawn Duhart, she, her series. I am a clinical social worker. I'm in my PhD for clinical social work as well. And I am a huge advocate on making sure that not only my voice is highlighted, but as well as maybe civilians who are interacting in our veteran space voices is highlighted, but as well as a student like Nick, who is as well a veteran and a disabled veteran. So we'll go ahead and move, let Claire move right into our next section. I'll start sharing our screen. We have just a nice little presentation, not too long. We try to be as explicit as possible because a lot of issues really just need to be plainly said. So I'll let Claire take it from here.
So today we will be discussing the following objectives. All of these are interconnected and vital to understanding and supporting disabled veterans. I encourage you to keep all of the objectives in mind during our presentation. The first of which is to identify the primary academic and social barriers veterans face in higher education. This will go into analyzing how mental health, physical disabilities, and institutional practices impact veterans' success, We will then go into applying strategies to foster an inclusive and supportive academic environment for disabled veterans, and learn to develop approaches to improve social integration and reduce stigmas around disabilities in academic spaces. Understanding these barriers and identifying action steps is crucial for creating a more inclusive campus environment. These skills and knowledge will help improve the academic and social experience for disabled veterans on college campuses. For students, this will lead to an increased understanding and support for peers, for faculty, an improved ability to teach and accommodate disabled veterans, and for staff, enhanced capabilities to provide appropriate services and support to student veterans.
So of course, we wouldn't be military if we didn't use lingo, acronyms, but again, I'll try to be as clear and explicit as possible for this presentation. You may hear service member, or you may hear that around campus. That's really a generic term we use to describe our active duty, National Guard, reservists, DoD civilians, those personnel who exist within that military sphere, who are actually the ones who can get the benefits, so that something we'll cover later. We also use veterans, so that's any individual who had served in the United States military, and that's regardless of their discharge status, whether it's an honorable discharge or a dishonorable discharge, they're still a veteran. We have our dependent and military affiliated students. For academia, that'll be the child, the spouse, or whoever is using that educational benefit from the veteran. We have our Veterans Affairs and VA. That's our overlord. That's the one entity that supports veterans, and that is their purpose. So we have multiple organizations that are supportive to veterans, but that is their main job. They're also one of the lead researchers in producing PTSD research and other mental health research that affects veterans. We move into that benefits piece. We have two different benefits you'll hear about. One is the education benefits. So we're thinking of that post 9/11 GI Bill, Veterans Readiness and Employment, and then the DEA bill for our dependents and spouses who are using the education benefit. That's not those two. You have your MOS rate and specialty code. That's simply their job or their rank in the military. And it's also in the Army known as the military occupational specialty. So for example, I was a 68 Tango animal care specialist, and I was a staff sergeant promotable. So those are all synonymous in what I did and who I was and rank in the military. So when you hear disabled veteran, or when you hear disabled student veteran, if you don't mind coming off of mute, can one or two people just describe what comes to mind, or what do you think of when you hear the words disabled veteran?
Hi, Alyssa here. I think of like overt disabilities, so like you can identify when someone is disabled based on how they look.
Yeah, and then I do see Anna, if I'm saying that right correctly, I don't want to mispronounce anyone's name. I am LaShawn, so I do see you put service-related disabilities, exactly. And then I also wanted to add those non-service related disabilities, because just because the VA did not say it was a disability does not mean you did not suffer, or you do not currently suffer. Correct, I see in the chat visible and invisible disabilities. Yes, so those are things you see, things you can't see. Again, most people will look at me, I'm bright pink, I'm always excited to be in the spaces, I'm always very floating around. However, I am 100% disabled veteran. So that is clearly most of my disabilities are invisible. Physical disabilities, yes, key. Physical disabilities and mental disabilities like PTSD and schizophrenia. Yes, that is one of them is less talked about, but it is something definitely as a clinician I've seen multiple times for individuals who not only go to war, but exist within toxic leaderships. So people who serve under just really mean, really rigid, really non-adaptable leaderships. Thomas Mitchell, yes, PTSD is a major issue. It's something that individuals also mark as synonymous with hearing a veteran. They do sometimes automatically assume that, the disabled veteran is disabled from PTSD or from some mental health issue. But in fact, there are so many different disabilities that could classify us as disabled. And then lastly, Jordan Griffin, I see two identities combined, disabled and veteran, whether disabled stems from service or not. Exactly. It's an intersectional term that most people do forget, that, again, it creates two different categories in which we have the service, the individual as a person who is in an entity, which again may have been combat related or not, and then as a disabled individual trying to navigate this system. So thank you so much for offering these. I'll definitely like for our next presenter, Nick, to cover a little bit more of what a disabled veteran is.
Thank you, LaShawn, and thank you for everyone who participated in answering those questions. So a basic understanding of what a disabled student veteran is. A disabled student veteran is a former service member with a disability pursuing higher education while facing unique academic and social challenges that require support and accommodations. So common disabilities for disabled student veterans with invisible disabilities frequently struggle in academia, as conditions like PTSD, TBI, or chronic pain can significantly impair cognitive functions, emotional regulation, and social interactions. Yet these challenges often go unnoticed or misunderstood by peers and faculty in classroom environments. To better understand this population, we've applied critical theory to our research. Veteran critical theory helps to examine veterans' unique challenges by analyzing how factors impact their social and academic experience. Veteran critical theory integrates 5 critical theories: feminist theory, critical race theory, queer theory, border theory, and disability theory.
Thank you, Nick. For this research, critical disability theory, also known as CDT, was primarily applied. CDT examines how societal structures and systems create and perpetuate barriers for disabled individuals. By focusing on the social model of disability, this theory emphasizes that disability is not solely an individual constraint, but a product of systemic inequalities and societal attitudes. It highlights the need for a critical examination of how these barriers can be dismantled to promote a more just and accessible society for all individuals, regardless of their abilities. You can see here, there is some data from the 2024 Student Veterans of America Census Report. Most of the respondents, 67.86%, have a VA disability rating, while 23.81% don't. A small number are either in the process of submitting a claim or aren't quite sure about their status yet. Largely, every disability is unique and has a different impact on each individual. The impact of these disabilities varies in different aspects of life, like employment, family, finances, and education. You can see in the data that many people report a severe or very significant effect. Notably, education has the highest category of respondents in the very category at 30.36%, with finances following closely at 21.82%. This data highlights how deeply disabilities can affect everyday life. Now that everyone is a bit more aware of the data, I would like you all to take a few moments and reflect about the experiences you've had with disabled veterans in the classroom. What challenges have you noticed? What successes have you noticed? Would anyone be willing to unmute themselves or share in the chat some of the challenges or successes they've seen or experienced?
Here just a little, if no one has experience, as someone who is not only a disabled veteran, but I also teach a few different disabled veterans. Some of my challenges is not myself not having any bias towards the population. So at times what that could show as, I already understand some of the situations they go through when they transition. I already understand that there's already need for a flexible course design. So I may most of myself is making sure that my peer group understands that we have to build not only a learning plan, but our teaching statements have to really reflect how we are serving this population, whether that's through ADEI, so whether that's through anti-racist frameworks included in DEI, or DEIA, whether that's that accessibility piece they also may need. But whenever I'm creating a classroom, I find challenges in not just going above and beyond for certain populations. But then I realize it's more of a holistic approach I'm taking, and where I'm making sure that not only is this population taken care of, but it can be applied to other populations. I do see that Alyssa said different perspectives. That is something that we get a lot whenever we interact with disabled veterans. It's individuals will at times believe that we all share the same perspectives, we share the same outlooks. We all believe that our benefits should all either be given to us or that we have either earned them or that we should just get a basic benefit of undergraduate. So it's really those different levels of perspectives from veterans themselves that could also bring challenges or sometimes the successes to the classroom. Feeling misunderstood or disconnected from civilian life and other traditional students. Absolutely. You see that 9 times out of 10 with a lot of our non-traditional students to where we don't know where our correct place is in higher education. So myself, I was a bit older when I came into education. I felt like I had to fly through it. I felt like I couldn't belong to certain clubs. And then other identities, which we'll talk about later, really helped me back from actually exploring different things outside of my veterans identities. So thank you so much, Jordan, for sharing that. Oh, I see another chat. Sorry, my chat's a little small. Students facing health challenges sometimes have a hard time evaluating how much they can do and when they feel better or worse. That is correct. I feel like that again applies for many different other categories, individuals, because as someone said earlier in the chat, these are 2 separate identities. So at times when they're a little harder on themselves or they can feel that life is a little challenging, it can also make it tough for them to integrate into classrooms or socialize into different settings. All right, and I'm gonna love that too, because that's a good one. Sorry. All right. All right, Sydney.
Thank you to everyone for sharing their perspectives on this. People with disabilities face numerous barriers in their daily life. A quick definition for the examination of barriers is examine social, cultural, and political factors that define disability and propagate discrimination against people with disabilities. The image in the middle portrays the concept of social barriers within society that surround disabled individuals. You can see that no matter which path the individual tries to take, they have to confront a barrier. Additionally, a more detailed breakdown of social barriers into 3 categories is illustrated in the third image. There are 3 categories: environmental inaccessibility, attitudes such as prejudice and discrimination, and rigid organizational procedures and practices. Barriers that disabled student veterans face can also be seen on larger scales like institutions, which Claire will be discussing more in depth.
Thank you, Sydney. Looking at specific macro and institutional barriers that disabled student veterans face, there are often inadequate support systems for service-related disabilities, and this can create a lot of isolation for student veterans and can lead to them feeling unable to find their needed resources. There are also many complex disability documentation requirements, and this can show up in many ways, from navigating the healthcare process on campus, waiving student insurance, to figuring out local service providers. In addition, it can be difficult to receive proper documentation for accommodations both through the VA and through the school. In addition, limited understanding of combat and non-combat related disabilities creates barriers for student veterans. There is often a disconnect in knowledge of veterans' affairs, and this can include knowledge of education benefits, disability claims, mental health resources, local providers, and many different things. When looking at the academic barriers faced by disabled veterans, they often interact with the barriers that exist for non-traditional students. Students are often balancing many other life roles and priorities, from family commitments to multiple jobs to medical appointments and many other things. There can often be a lot of time spent commuting back and forth from school to home, and that time needs to be considered. Often the VA appointments don't fully accommodate the student's schedule, so there may be classes missed due to having attend appointments. There's also a need for accommodations for student veterans. Ensuring that veterans are connected to disability resources on campus is important. There can also be stigmatization inside and outside of the classroom. This can show up in many ways and will be discussed a little bit more later on in the presentation. For non-traditional students, it is important to create accessible learning formats, whether this is in person, online, asynchronous, synchronous. It's important to check in with student veterans and ensure that they're getting the information in a way that is helpful for them. There can also be social barriers for disabled veterans, the first of which being a lack of sense of belonging. Feeling disconnected from the broader campus community and struggling to find a place within college campus to find that sense of community can take a long time, and without knowledge of the adequate resources being provided, it can take a little bit longer. There also is often limited understanding of military culture. Peers lacking awareness of military experience and values and can lead to misinterpretation of veteran behaviors or communication styles. There can also be challenges in forming those new social connections. Hesitancy to engage in social activities due to disability-related concerns and difficulty finding common ground with non-veteran students can be present. There's also stigma around both visible and invisible disabilities, and those can differ widely. There are often misconceptions about service-related injuries or conditions and a reluctance to disclose disabilities in social situations. When working with student veterans as a work study or in an internship, there can also be barriers that show up. First of which being limited workplace accessibility. Physical environments are often not adapted for service-related disabilities. This can include ramps, and there also needs to be an additional assistive technology in these locations. So transcribing, audio recording, and making sure that students feel that they can do those things and get the help that they need. There's also can be barriers with inflexible work arrangements and rigid schedules conflicting with ongoing medical treatments. It is important to talk about skill translation with disabled student veterans because it can be difficult to translate military experience into civilian job requirements. There can also be a gap in recent civilian work experience due to service, and learning how to navigate that and help students create the best resumes and job materials is very important. When looking at mental health stigma, concerns about disclosing PTSD or other mental health conditions can exist. There can be a fear of discrimination in hiring processes, in classrooms, and also in that social environment discussed earlier.
Claire. So really looking at all of these challenges and these barriers that this population face, we also have to talk about that intersectionality piece that was brought up a little earlier. So I always love to share I am a queer, Black, disabled, female veteran, and that is a whole bunch of intersecting identities that make up this great person in front of you. So what that means, it deals with understanding how the aspects of not only a person's social identity relates to them, but as well as that political identity. So again, you're going to hear me say it a lot: gender, race, class, sexuality, ability status, especially for this population, how that all combines to either create different modes of discrimination or privilege. I know how my discrimination can come up, especially with me being a Black woman, me being a queer woman, me being a disabled woman, but also recognize my privileges I have for being a veteran. I'm able to go to school, I'm able to get my PhD without debt. It's understanding how those different modes show up and how we actually address them when they do show up. But intersectionality in veterans really refers to the way their identities intersect with their veteran identity. So whether your veteran identity is your main identity, it is still an identity that is created and that can be intersected through. So when we look at that, we have to understand this all results in a compounding with their experiences to create not only bias, but discrimination as well as privilege. So with that being said, intersectional challenges will arise from this whole identity. So again, these intersectional identities may be different identities, but they combine to create one. So first we have balancing military and student roles. It's really that sense of belonging. We're trying to balance that we're coming from a majority and now we're in a minority space. And then if you're also a Black student, you're also a student of color, you're also a queer student, you fall under any of those marginalized or disparate identities, you then have a loyalty kind of complex, so where you really don't know what area you should serve or belong to. So while I was working as a veterans work study when I was first starting in college a long time ago, I also wanted to work in different areas of social work, and I wanted to definitely branch out and see if that would work for me. And it eventually did. I eventually was able to become president of my honor society in social work. However, I wasn't able to do that till my senior year, when I finally was able to understand that loyalty can be given to multiple different areas. And that's just way too long for a student to have to wait to figure out where they could belong. You then have those compounding challenges of racism and discrimination. So again, our students of color, our marginalized, disparate students, this group extremely experiences this on a heightened level when they're also a veteran and they're also disabled. Next, we have a lack of access to tailored student support programs or tailored student support in general. So thinking of those multiple identities that intersect and create complex issues, we also have to understand that this is also going to be a reason why it creates those challenges. I'm sorry for the background noise. And then you have age and stereotyping. Generally, we think of a veteran as being over 35, being a white cisgender man. But in reality, if you look at myself or you look at Nick, you see that we come in different shapes and sizes. I might be a little taller than Nick, but in reality, we're veterans. There is this idea that there's no such thing as a modern veteran, and that we'll discuss later. But by not acknowledging these identities and that they intersect, you will create more bias. You will continue to produce discrimination to not only the military and disabled veteran population, but as well to all populations that have these intersecting identities. Oh, it's gone, thank you. So for teachers, anyone who plans to work with this population, or again, if you just have students who are disabled veterans or veterans in your classroom, it's best to use a critical approach when trying to teach or trying to learn to teach this group. You want to first empower through accessibility. So that means designing courses that are not only accessible, but you're going to hear me say this a million times, flexible. You want to make sure it's meeting not only the diverse needs of student veterans, but their disabled population. So again, that intersecting piece, you're going to hear a million times. What will be good for one could be good for many. Not saying that for all of it, but just at least with this course design, you could help many other students outside of that disabled student veterans realm by just being accessible or more flexible with your course designs. You then want to address and challenge ableism and also military stereotypes as they appear in maybe classroom discussions with peers, or they may appear in the material you will teach. You want to make sure you're giving not only the most relevant, but you're also giving compassionate information to ensure you're not triggering, or you're not making individuals who fall under these identities uncomfortable. You want to also encourage disabled student veterans to engage by providing multiple ways to participate and contribute based on their abilities. So again, as Claire stated, you want to make sure to offer virtual options. You want to make sure to offer maybe hearing assistive options. I know schools have the Disability Resource Center, Disability Resource Office. You want to ensure that you're working with them if you have students who are in your class with disabilities, to ensure you're creating that inclusive participation and inclusive atmosphere they can exist in. So for best practices, when you engage with a disabled student veteran, you want to actively learn, not only with them, you want to make sure they're actively learning. So active learning allows veterans to apply their practical real-time skills in making the classroom experience more relevant for not only them, but other individuals who may have parts of their identity. You want to focus on peer collaboration. So that doesn't just mean creating a group of disabled student veterans or veterans to work together. You want to make sure that you're not only actively listening, you're actively watching your class to see who are they interacting with, who are they comfortable with. Is there a civilian person who maybe will be within their identity spectrum, or even someone who they can identify with, that they're comfortable having conversations with? You want to make sure you're just fostering that with group projects, assignments, and you're placing them again with individuals just not of the veterans diaspora, but as well as seeing if there are other individuals who they may get along with. Lastly, that flexibility piece. You want to continue to be flexible with not only accommodations, but participation. Because again, you may have a veteran who wants to speak up, but then you may have a veteran who is having issues, some disabilities. Maybe they're having that invisible disability piece with vocalization. You just want to ensure that you're meeting the student where they're at so they can also be a part of this classroom. So for teaching techniques, I have two that I use, two that I recommend that I really think are very important. First is that universal design for learning. And every teacher should really be using this. This is important to me, not only for disabled student veterans, but for all students who are in our classrooms who are just trying to thrive. What this means is you're designing courses, again, that are flexible, accessible, but that will help not only the veterans with disabilities, but will help all students with disabilities. And this is from start to finish. So whether that's just in your course design, that should also show up in your teaching statements, that should also show up maybe in your pre-class surveys, but it's making sure that these are not only accessible, but flexible. And lastly, you want to use a trauma-informed approach to teaching. So this just means, again, not only being sensitive to the veteran's past experience, but using a lot of what you know from their past experiences, maybe they've disclosed, or maybe you know just in general, to create a more supportive understanding space that not only fosters that growth, but also protects them from being triggered from that trauma. So again, maybe it's sensitivity within the course material, within the way you approach the course material, or maybe it's just talking to the student veteran before or after class to do a check-in to ensure that the information you're teaching will not cause a trigger. All can fall within the realm of trauma-informed teaching.
When looking at best practices for working with veteran student employees and interns, flexible scheduling can be really important and can often really help student veterans. From offering different ways to complete trainings, to offering different breaks, different locations, working at a coffee shop, working remote, it can depend on the day, but that flexible scheduling can be really important in creating that space that is needed. There should also be tailored onboarding and making sure to get to know each employee as an individual and as a person and not just as an employee, and then to create that space for peer mentorship. There should also be adaptive workspaces, and this can look very different from different seating options to standing desks to locations that offer varying levels of sound and also allowing that remote time. By creating an inclusive team culture through regular check-ins, this can make sure that everyone is getting the level of connection and support that they need, and looking at individuals can help notice any changes in behavior, and it should be proactive in addressing that. When looking at career development support, be knowledgeable in that veterans have a lot of experience, and translating that military experience into civilian resumes is really important. It should also be known that it is important to learn the acronyms that are used within the military culture to help relate to student veterans. Providing safe spaces is another way to ensure that the office you work in is a safe space for students to disclose their experience, and also be aware that there are veterans who do not wish to disclose their experience, and there should be space for any and all of that within the workspace.
Thank you, Claire. Just to add a little to that, here at UNC, we foster safe environments. So whether that's in our Marcus Garvey, whether that's in our Asian Pacific Islander or Native student services, or you can find that at our gender resource centers or Center for Women's and Genders Equity. But regardless, in all the spaces that we're connected to, whether culturally or our supportive spaces like Cozy, we want to ensure that we are always fostering an inclusive, positive, and safe environment here at UNC, so all students can thrive in any space they attend. So whether you attend a veteran service event, just know it is closely connected to maybe one of the other cultural or resource centers that we have here. And we all try to at least follow that DEI mantra, as well as adding the accessibility piece as well.
When looking at best practices for increasing that sense of belonging, creating veteran-centric spaces can be really beneficial. Dedicated lounges or study areas can provide a safe and comfortable space for veterans to gather, as well as foster that sense of community and gather peer support. Also, offering quiet areas for studying or just decompressing can be very beneficial. When looking at accessible design features Ensuring all areas are accessible and including accommodations for service animals are really important. Including that adaptive technology mentioned earlier is also quite important. By including visible military recognition elements, whether that be artwork, branch flags, peer artwork, and other memorabilia, this can help create that sense of safety. When looking at peer mentorship initiatives, this can really help foster peer connections and shared experiences and provide a safe space for discussing transition challenges. It is also really important to offer emotional support and understanding and encourage collaborative learning among veterans. So this can be shown in the veteran-to-veteran support programs, the group study sessions, and also social skill building activities. It is important to consider inclusive campus events as well. As LaShawn just mentioned, there's that universal design aspect of what might be good for one will be good for all. And so by creating inclusive campus events for disabilities and everyone will benefit from that. Through military culture awareness programs, this can help educate the broader campus community about military experiences and promote understanding of veteran perspectives and challenges. Creating adaptive recreational activities can look like offering different sports or activities for modified abilities and encouraging participation regardless of physical limitations. Promoting physical and mental well-being through this inclusive recreation can really help with that sense of belonging. It is also important to make an effort to include student veterans in the wider campus population. This can be shown in class study groups and social events that can work to create community among all members of the campus community. Veteran-focused organizations such as Student Veterans of America or Salute the National Honor Society, having that presence on campus can help facilitate peer connections and mentorship opportunities. It can also help provide those leadership opportunities for veterans, which can leverage veterans' leadership experience in campus roles and encourage participation in student government and committees. By creating a veteran liaison position to bridge administration and veteran students, it can help voices be heard across campus. The last little piece is interest-based veterans groups. This can help cater to diverse veteran interests. For example, we had a D&D group last year. We do often a lot of video game nights, things like that. Can help foster that community in a way that isn't academic and help just really build those personal connections and provide an avenue for stress relief.
I wish I knew D&D, but they were playing it. So I'll start with the call to action. I always like to start with that because academic support is something I think that at least a lot of academics and our staff, and again, as students, we're not hurting to do, but I think just providing that little information at the end will be sensible. But I'm asking you to recognize diverse experiences, not just within that veteran identity, but within the disabled identity, that disabled individuals can look different, have different experiences. What may have been positive for one, as we said, what may work for one, work for another, but what may cause harm to one may cause harm to another. So, splitting hairs is one thing, but understanding the difference is another. You want to make sure you're not only fostering, again, that inclusive environment, but you're being flexible, not only in accommodations to whether you're extending maybe a homework period out for that veteran student, extend the homework period out for all students, making sure that maybe that discussion can just be a few days late, and that's understandable because as someone with 32 students, not every discussion is going to be graded in a week. So have that flexibility to understand if you are one person and you have this large deal and you have your disabilities, you also understand your students have that disability as well, or they may have those issues or similar issues. You want to make sure you're promoting veteran-specific resources. So whether you're a student, whether you're a staff member, again, whether you're faculty, you're taking that time to understand what exists on your campus and how you can better connect and serve your veteran and student population. Lastly, continue to challenge stereotypes and assumptions. Not every veteran has PTSD, but not every veteran has healthcare. Not every veteran will be using post-9 GI Bill, but not every veteran has that benefit to use. So understanding that those stereotypes and assumptions will continue to produce bias and discrimination is important. So what do you do for academic support? You want to make sure that if you interact with a student veteran or a disabled veteran and they explain to you they have a disability, you may casually, or as the professor or as the full-time staff member, you're connecting them to that campus disability office. You want to make sure as well as maybe, again, you're the professor, you're the student, you're the staff, you're also aware of your veteran student organizations on campus, because they're not just for us veterans. We do many events for also our connecting population. So as long as you support us, as long as you are creating and fostering a safe space for veteran students, you are more than welcome to come to all events that we have. And that's across the plethora of all of our cultural and resource centers. Oops, sorry about that. You want to also help them schedule meetings with their academic advisors. So as the professor, as a staff member, these are things we should be doing. But as a student, you maybe just have that little bit of knowledge to where the academic advisors are for your specific major that they don't have. You may have, again, maybe the courses that you're supposed to take, and they're like, I don't know what I'm supposed to take next semester. Just being a good classmate, a good peer, and connecting them to those resources. You yourself may want to just explore VA educational benefits and resources. You'll never know who you can help that day. You never know what information can be pushed out equitably that day. But as well as you may not know that maybe your grandparents, your parents, you may not know what benefits you have. So it's best if you ever have the question, do I have these benefits? You check on your VA education benefits, you come into your VA education resource office, whether that's here at UNC or maybe I know CU Boulder, they have an amazing one, as well as others. All of ours really interconnect to make sure we're connecting students to the right resources. So if I can't provide it here at UNC, I know great individuals at CSU Pueblo who can also provide you with the same. And then lastly, attend 1 or 2 orientation sessions, not just for veterans, but for non-traditional students, because unfortunately that is where our population will get pushed into, is into adult learners, and as well as into non-traditional students orientation sessions, which are sometimes kind of synonymous with transfer sessions. A lot of our veterans, again, look differently, they act differently, they are differently, and we come in different ages. So what may appear to be an adult veteran, maybe someone outside that traditional age of college, is actually probably just a 19-year-old veteran who did discharge from the military with disabilities that are severe. But attend those orientation sessions, learn as a staff and faculty member how you can make it better. And as a student, learn what you can do as a peer to at least create a better sense of belonging between you and this population. So just a little reflection. No one has to unmute if you don't want to. You can just throw these into the chat. But again, consider what current teaching practices might unintentionally create better barriers for veteran students. What changes could you implement? So whether that's to your classroom or to a classroom you've been in, but what changes would you implement to make a more inclusive and supportive atmosphere for our veterans with their unique identities? And how would these changes actually benefit the wider student population? So again, no one really has to answer that. That's just really reflecting. If you could change anything in the courses that exist right now, if you can change anything within the areas you interact in to support this population, what would you change? Would you change those barriers that Sydney brought up? Would you change your academic approaches that Claire spoke of that creates barriers? Or would you honestly just look at the veteran as a whole, like Nick explained, through veterans critical theory, to see what their interactions with society, especially education, is like? Because if we do this, again, using that universal design for learning, we are better helping more students than just that population. I want to thank you all so much. Again, I told you I like to be explicit. I like to, I can't say I'm like the Navy SEAL because I was a vet tech, but I like to get in, I like to give you the information. I like to make sure it's as clear as possible that we understand that, again, a universal definition for a disabled veteran is, again, as someone stated in the chat, these are 2 different identities, and we have to cater to these identities and their other intersecting identities. So if you would like to connect with me, please feel free. Don't be too scared of prints. That's just how I look when people said they don't know anything about disabled veterans. I'm like, you should know, because you probably know a veteran or you know someone who's disabled, but you know what a disabled veteran is now. You can connect with Claire Sharp as well. I like to say she's boss lady. So she really keeps this organization running. She really makes sure that, especially with her not having the actual veteran identity, she goes above and beyond to make sure our population is not only heard, but they're seen. Or maybe you just want to talk to Nick and Sydney. They did an amazing job. They always do an amazing job. And they are here at the Veteran Services. We will be celebrating our 80th anniversary. I'm not sure if we're the oldest, but I'm going to put it out there. This is our 80th anniversary of being a Veteran Services here at UNC. We'll be celebrating that on November 16th with a 5K. They've been doing annually from Dan Turnbaum to my predecessor, Timothy Nellett. It's something they even continued over COVID. So with that being said, I want to thank you so much, and I want to leave a little time for questions. Maybe you have more for Nick and Sydney than you have for us, but we're all on the line.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, LaShawn and Nick, Sydney, Claire. This was really great and very informative. Yeah.